Welcome, Jen Dykstra. We've known each other for about 20 years. One thing about Jen that's always been fun for me. We've had some great conversations, especially over the last year. But most people tell me that I have somewhat of a bigger personality with a little bit of charisma. And Jen, when I think about those two words, you always come to mind. Um, One, two, and the big personality, the big laugh. Jen is an absolute blast to be around, and over the last year or so, had some things that popped up that weren't a part of your plan. But Jen, I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you are, spouse, all that type of stuff. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I just really appreciate you having me here to kind of talk about the last year and honestly, probably like my lifetime when I really look back on it. But just a little bit about me is I, first and foremost, am a child of God. I was just writing an intro into one of those Facebook group things, and I've kind of been refining that over the last year. So first and foremost, I'm a child of God. Second, I'm a wife and a dog mom, no children. So I love, love, love. We have a 14-and-a-half-year-old dog named Tommy who goes with us everywhere. I am a mortgage lender and I'm also a health and wellness advocate. I'm a craft beer lover. Yes, I love a good craft beer. And I like adventure, I like travel, and I'm just like you kind of talked about, I am a professional development junkie lately. I just love learning and growing and seeing where all of this life thing takes me. So,
And what's interesting, so, we worked together for maybe not always, right next to each other, but worked for the same company, a large lending institution for what, 15 years or so in the same town, and then for a while outside of it. And as much as it disappointing that I'm not working with you as a coworker, but we have this great mutual respect, and we are competing in the same market. But when she talks about being a self-development junkie as of late, was one of the great things is when you're friends with Jen, you'll always get some really nice nuggets and some links that come out to you. We're both Ed Milet fans, and
mhm.
you're turning me on to somebody else here recently too. You got to remind me of the name.
That Rob Dial, the
No, there's
mindset
another
mentor.
one. The one you sent here from me
Oh,
recently.
yeah, Jamie Winship. He talks on identity. And I will tell you, like, he has blown my mind with the stories of faith and belief and how just how to step into your own identity and truly be who you're designed to be. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's been really good. And like I said earlier when we started this, is there's some similarities I think in our personality, but I think probably what shines more than anything else when I'm having a conversation with you, I realize that our value systems are very much in line. A lot of our interests are in line from our health. Of course, we love having conversations about God and Jesus and all of that. But
Mm.
you said one thing as of lately. So let's go back. What are we talking here? And you know where I'm going with this.
Mhm.
But what was it? About a little over a year ago, things tipped over a little bit, and your plans changed. So I'm gonna let's turn that over and let you kind of walk us through that because it's kind of a cool story. And so I want you to kick that off.
Yeah, so February of last year, I was actually on PTO of all things, and I see this meeting invite come across, and it says it's mandatory. I'm like, okay, I should probably sit on that. And so I'm sitting on that call. It was a call, and unfortunately, my position was eliminated, and along with numerous other people, was that eliminated. And initially, I was sitting there and I'm like, oh, okay. I had literally said to my friend sitting next to me in the car because I was in the car taking some friends to the airport. And I said, I think I should maybe start like considering some other options. And sure enough, all of a sudden, then it just like happened. And initially, I was in shock and awe. And then I went into what I normally do, which is like be the fixer. Like, okay, these are the things that I have to get done. I think we all have that, right? Like, what can we control? what are those things that we have to do in the moment, um, like to protect ourselves, to protect our family, to do all of those kinds of things. And that's kind of what happened next. Then the next day we were flying home. Thankfully, we made it home. There, like we live in South Dakota. We were flying from Florida home, and there was a snowstorm, so I had no idea whether we would get home or not. Like we didn't know whether we would get to stay overnight in Atlanta or if we'd actually make it home. So fortunately, we made it home. We were like the last flight in that night, and the next day I literally slept like probably a full 24 hours. Like we got up, we picked up our dog from our doggy daycare sitter that she takes care of him all the time. She's like his best friend. Took her home because she doesn't like to drive. She's older, doesn't like to drive. And then I came home and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna take a nap. And it was kind of that rest and release that my body needed after 20 years of being with a company that I thought would be like my lifelong company, right? And then the next day I actually woke up and my husband was like, "Okay, are we good?" And he's like, "I didn't know for sure if you were going to be okay." And I was like, "I think I just needed to rest and release." And I had this like weight lifted off my shoulders and I could just kind of like breathe and settle and like and that's kind of where it all just started was like I just knew that I needed that rest and release. And I reached out to a couple of friends, and another friend had just recently gone through something similar. And she's like, you need to just take some time. I'm like, what? I don't ever like just stop. I
It's like, who
always
are you? Who
am in
says
like
things like that?
go mode, right? And I actually had a couple other you were one of them. Another friend of ours, Troy, was one, and another gentleman at another financial institution reached out and said, "You just need to stop and take a minute and take some time and like kind of just let go." And like I use the word sometimes detox, which that seems so negative, but I think in a world where we are always going, we're always like being bombarded with all of the stuff, like sometimes we do just need to learn to be quiet and to like reframe or detox or start to learn how to dream again. That's really what that journey was about last year was taking that time.
Yeah, and Jen, just for the listeners, if there's probably some perspective like, well, did you get let go? What did you do? This
Hmm.
was a massive layoff by this company, and there was everyone got swept up in it. It wasn't like it was individual, and so Jenny, you talked about it. You thought that this is basically your forever home, and you would kind of ride off into the sunset, maybe have a retirement party someday, and all
Hmm.
of that. And all of a sudden, you're like, I don't get any of that.
Hmm.
But the beauty of it is, you did get a little financial severance,
Hmm.
and if you talk to me, my first instinct was when I found out when you had sent the text, and I was like, sweet, go get another job, go double dip.
Hmm.
Would have been the biggest mistake you probably ever made in your life, wouldn't it have?
Yeah, for sure. Totally
You,
would have been. I would have
because
just
what
jumped
you
from one thing to the other without taking time to reset.
Yeah, and did you ever guess, 20 years, kind of, head down, just
Mhm.
go, go, go. But if someone would have said, "Are you burnt out?" What would you have said if somebody would have asked you that? You're in Florida, you're taking a little time away. On the way back, if somebody would have said, "Are you burnt out?" What would your answer have been?
I would have always said that there are seasons of it, but you just learn how to keep moving forward and like find the joy in the moment versus like I would just be like, okay, well, I'm learning something, or like I just would have kept moving forward. So did
Right,
I ever use the word burnout? No.
right. So, as I said, probably the biggest mistake you ever would have made. Now we have hindsight to see that,
Hmm.
but someone gave you some great advice. You took it, seeking wise
Hmm.
counsel. I think that's somewhere in the Bible too. But
Yeah.
seeking wise counsel, and so it was fun. I'm obviously wasn't part of that journey, but our conversations that we had during that time,
Hmm.
quite frankly, they were instrumental for some of the things that I've changed in my life too. But if nothing else, it probably validated, I think, for both of us, some of the things that we believed. That were
Hmm.
like, yeah, I'm not alone in my thoughts and all that stuff. And so we're like, so you sleep,
Hmm.
You wake up and like, what's the next steps? Because obviously you're like, where do I start? And kind of talk to us, like, where was it you found your strength, and found kind of that, I guess, some stable ground first of all, and then where did it kind of where you went from that to your self development, and what were some of those sources? Because I think a lot of people out there today are like, yeah, you know what? I'd love to get into some of that, but like, where do you go? Like, how do you know like who you're supposed to listen to? We might listen to Ed Milet, but maybe some
Hmm.
people it doesn't resonate with them. So, you want to give us some of the examples of what you did?
Yeah, so I honestly credit a lot of it is about 3 years ago, I started kind of an entrepreneurial adventure as well. And it really taught me more than just like going out and helping or selling a product, but it was more about like personal growth and having like a daily, like they call it a daily method of operation, right? Which I think in business, we call it the same thing. We just call it like activities or ROI or all of those kinds of things, right? But all of that framework was really do something to invest in your mind. For me, like I created my own invest in my body. So I always like to move my body on a daily basis. And then I always needed to feed my spirit. So whether it's a devotional or whether you're into meditation, for me, it's a devotional or reading the Bible or prayer and silence. Like silence, I hate silence, but I learned to love silence. And the first thing that I did was I changed my schedule. So I used to always like get up, work out, do some emails, and then get ready for the day and then head off to work. Like that was my routine. And so instead, for me, I'm Catholic. And so I chose that I was going to get up, shower quick, and then I would go to a daily mass. And then I would go work out. And then I would have that extra prayer time at the end. And so I just reframed like how my day started to move me into a different momentum. Like I knew that I had to change something. And so for me, it was changing my morning schedule because that routine had been with me for years. And so I had to physically make a change in order for me to start to mentally make that change.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that people find routines. You know, let's
Hmm.
just say if you take a 5-year-old and they get in a routine, you break them out of it one day, it's
Hmm.
messy. You break them out of it 2 days, it's like you're starting all over again, with kids, and people say, well, that's a kid's thing. No, it's an everyday rest of
Hmm.
your life thing. Routines become, sometimes they're good, but other times I think they become trenches,
Hmm.
that we don't know, that we don't even realize we're in. And it's funny because, like, as of late, my morning, rituals is pretty much the same month
Hmm.
or Sunday through Saturday. Time to wake up, walking the dog, doing all these types of things at the same time. And as of late, I've kind of realized that maybe I'm missing something. I need to kind of step away from that a
Hmm.
little bit. I just haven't quite figured out what it is. But I think, yeah, sometimes breaking that up. And you had, what do you want to call it, an enlightening or an awakening at somewhere through all of this? So is that too profound, or do you feel like those words are somewhat accurate, and kind of rediscovering who you are?
Yeah, I think that it was, and maybe it's awakening, maybe it's a rediscovery. Um, I think I go back to like all of the ways in which I look back at what happened last year, and my word for last year was surrender. And so I think what happened was is that like I was being prepared for something to happen where it was out of my control and I needed to look to either something else, someone else, or to look for ways to like change and be open to that change, and just allow it to just happen as opposed to trying to control it. And I am a control freak like no other. And I also don't like change. So all of that just like this came all together all at once. And for what I just knew in my being I had to make a change. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, and you kind of forced it. You know, instead
Hmm.
of you making the decision, it was made for you. And we had, a lot of conversations, and as I said before, we've got a lot of the same values. So, this conversation is somewhat of a mirror of some of the ones that we've had. But you had talked about, and this is, if you haven't, that's fine. But, at that point, then you start to say, maybe I need to write a book, or how do I
Mhm.
impact,
Mhm.
whether it's the real estate community, the mortgage lending community, or just your community in general. And having time to sit and brainstorm that between your own ears is one thing. So if you look back now over the last year, and obviously the story's not over, but if you look
Mhm.
back at that time, is there anything that you went, that's something I need to do or want to do, and you've kind of carried that through, or you've started something?
Yeah, so two things. One, last year in January, before all of this went down, it happened in February. I had actually started to journal, which I'm just not good at it, or I think I'm not good at it. I had started to journal to kind of just write. And so that is one of the things that has definitely carried me through is the just being able to journal, like what it is that happened in my day, what are some of the good things that happened, what are some things that I needed to like work on, or what are some things that I think didn't go well. And then one of the things that I did go back and revisit was something I learned from an old coach, was to take a day and to write a life plan. And so it was really broken down into writing my obituary again. Like, how do I want to be remembered? And it was those kinds of things. So I hadn't really done that for probably about 10 years. And I had done that back when I was at this company. I wrote my life plan, how I wanted to be remembered, or my obituary. Then I wrote down like the things that were important, like all of those, like some people call them non-negotiables or the things that I have to do. So I really went through, like they call them life accounts, like family, faith, my body, my spouse, relationships that were important. And then I just literally wrote like a day in the life. What would be the perfect day in the life of this? And what would be the perfect day in the life of, say, like my body or how I take care of myself or my wellness or my faith life or my spouse life, whatever that is. And I went down and I just kind of started to dream again. And that was really where some of those, it was listening to my heart, like things that I already know to be true. And then it gave me permission to say yes to certain things and no to others, and then really dive deep into like what is it that I want from a work experience. And that was probably the hardest life account to rewrite, was because when I wrote it before, I wrote it at an organization with like what I thought was like this kind of next level of success, and not having an attachment or a commitment to any other organization at this time, and really writing down, what does it look like? What does success look like to me? What does it mean to work on a daily basis? What's important to me when I'm looking and having conversations with future employers, so that it was easy for me then, instead of writing a pros and cons list, I could truly look and say, this fits who I am, what I want to do, and how I can either help them or help people that I need to serve.
Right. Understanding like what serves you
Hmm.
in what's serving others.
Hmm.
And that's something that within the last couple of months, there's a guy by the name, maybe you know him. There's a guy by the name of Steve Larson, who's in Sioux Falls, and he's known as the growth coach. He went into the franchise years ago, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Steve for a long time, and go into some of the coaching, coaching that he's done. And he had talked about, he said, it's funny how many times, you start these off and you tell somebody like, hey, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like in 10 years? And he goes, almost everybody, they have to stop. He goes, I got to give so much time for that, because it takes people 5 to 10 minutes, and now they're going to come up with it.
Hmm.
I'm gonna design my 10-year
Hmm.
plan for the rest of my
Hmm.
life in these 5 minutes. Obviously, you can't, but the point of the drill is we don't take any time to do that,
Hmm.
and we don't know where we're going, because we
Right.
just literally just go, well, I'm here and I'm just driving forward, and I do that. And I think one of the words that you and I had talked about, one of those conversations, and you'd said like, "What's the legacy I'm going to leave?" You
Hmm.
know, and some people look at that and say, "Well, that's not for me to determine," and other people believe that they do
Hmm.
determine it. But I do know one thing, and we've all heard it before. It's not what people will remember what I did, but it's remember they will remember how I made them feel. And I think that was a big shift in my life. And I think that you kind of had that same kind of moment too, where you're like, I know that I'm out, I know I'm doing something to serve other people. One, I'm not doing a whole lot for myself,
Hmm.
which I need to, because if I can't put the oxygen mask on, I'm certainly not going to be able to save anybody
Hmm.
else. And the other side of it, you know, when you're really like to say, I'm going to serve others, but what does that look like? Is it just in my occupation? I get paid to do this. What can I do outside of it? I think that's one where a lot of people struggle. It's what do I do is something that doesn't pay me. What am I super passionate about? So when you went through this, you know, kind of analyzation of all of this stuff. So one I got to ask you,
Hmm.
the journaling thing, has it turned into to writing a book at all? Is
Well,
that
so
still on your
actually,
radar?
so I've had on my bucket list of things to do is to write a devotional. And I haven't done it. Like it's been probably on my heart for like 4 years. Uh, excuse me. I write every day something. Um, the journaling has not. I had actually stopped for a while. And I just honestly repicked journaling back up on Sunday. Like no joke. I just picked it back up on Sunday. And it's been a great way to get my thoughts off my head and also find that like rest again and to find that like calming, soothing rest again.
So, and if you listen to it was a few podcasts ago, there's a gentleman by the name of Daryl Bram who I had on there, Bram on the on a podcast, and he wrote a book, and it's kind of in this process now. They're trying to edit it. He's like they chop the crap out of it and everything, but
Mhm.
I learned through a conversation with him. It's like, well, whenever you write this, if you want to be on the bestsellers list, just dump your $25,000 and you'll rise right to the top. Maybe the devotional won't be that type of a book, but he said if you want to be rich, writing a book will not get you there. Trust me. He says
Mhm.
the amount of cost that it takes before you ever start making a penny is probably not worth it. But I think there's a lot of value to what you said. Is writing something down. And I am horrible at it. I've had more people say, "Do you journal?" And they're like, "You should." And I don't
Mhm.
know why. I've tried it. It's like meditation for me.
Mhm.
Love it. I get to do it about once every, I don't know, 2 months, and
Mhm.
I see all the advantage and the benefits of it. But I have a little different forms, maybe that I do of meditation. But so, you know, today, you know, you found where you wanted to kind of start with your occupation again. But um, what you know, you said about dreams. What dreams do you have out there now? Is there something out on the horizon that you're looking at and you're saying, yeah, that's something, and maybe it's not now, but it's someday.
Mhm. Yeah, I actually have a couple different things. So one, I think the devotional is part of that. Two, I think I feel like in general in the world today, our connections are oftentimes transactional instead of relational. And I've had this desire to teach relationship. I often find, so I always say coffee is king. You can call somebody, you can make an appointment with them, and if you go to lunch, it might just be a free lunch, right? But if you go to coffee, you could sit there for 10 to 20 minutes and be like, "Hey, gotta go, that didn't work." Or you could sit there for 2 or 3 hours, like you and I could do over and over and over again. But when you truly sit down and just take the time to be present, you get to know people. You get to know like who they are, what's important to them. And you just get to allow things to happen that wouldn't happen if you're just probably sitting there kind of waiting for your food or kind of feeling like you're making small talk until like the interruption comes with a server. Um, and I think that there are little things that you can do to build relationship, but we sometimes take them for granted. And so my goal really is at some point in time to, I don't know, help other people build relationships instead of it being just a transactional, specifically within the real estate world. Right now, that's where I kind of feel like that's why I was led back into this world versus somewhere else or doing something different. But I would really like to help people instead of it being transactional, instead of it just being about prospecting, like how do we really build relationships that are lasting, and that it's not about whether or not you refer a customer to me or if I refer somebody back to you, but how do I truly help people grow their business so that they can become more successful? The end of my obituary is this end of a poem where there's a the tide has just come in. There's a little boy walking along the beach, and it's littered with starfish. And this kid is just going and throwing them back in. And an old guy says to him, like you can picture it in your mind, right? Like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm throwing these guys back in. He's like, well, you can't help all of them, right? And he said, no, but it makes a difference to this one. And that's kind of like how I derive my success is how every day do I make a difference for somebody? It could be internally at my company. It could be externally that somebody's watching what I record on Facebook, or it could simply be a conversation I'm having. But like what drives my success is not the transactions. It's I love helping people, but it's not those things that drive my success. It's truly, did I make a difference today for somebody else?
Yeah, I think a lot of times what I've discovered with myself, and maybe you do too, that word of making a difference, it gets into your brain and you think that it's got to be something so big and so impactful, and it's going to be life changing for someone and everyone will remember it. And it's really not about that at all, is it? It's
Mm-mm,
literally it's the little dinky things that you do each day that become habitual and
mm-hmm.
so normal to you that you don't realize that someone else was greatly impacted by it. And I always think the best compliment with somebody that I haven't seen in years will come up and say, "You did something for me that was life changing, or you helped my career, or whatever that may be, or you said something that was so inspiring." Even looking back at like college teammates, if you hear something back and you're like, "Man, that was 30 some years ago," but they'll remember like one thing that you said before a game, and you just go, "Wow, did not know that was going to be that big of a deal," but it was for at least the
Yeah.
one person, and it got them through. And you've I don't know if you're doing it anymore. At least I'm not seeing it as often. You used to read some gospel
Mm-hmm.
onto Facebook, and those are one of those little things that maybe it doesn't get 100 likes and shares and all type of stuff, but you just know that people are listening, and it's changing something. And for you specifically, Jen, you definitely feel like that's what you were called to do as well.
Yeah, I think it's those little things, and I had stopped for a while because I didn't feel that I was showing up for the right reasons. And so sometimes I still have to like check myself and step back and be like, okay, why is it that I'm doing this? Like, and if it's about me, then I have to stop doing it and reframe why I'm doing it. And so I've recently just gotten back into it again, and I probably do it more instead of it having to be like habitual, like every single day. I'm doing it a couple times when the spirit leads, right? But in other ways, I love like inspiring other people. So I'm doing it in other ways with quotes or things like that to put it out in the world because there's so much negativity out in the world. And I just want to be a light. Like, how can I bring joy and abundance and help other people see their value versus it being about me just spewing out words, if
Right.
that makes
Well,
sense.
and you do. I mean, literally, when I walked by you just last week, I couldn't help myself. I had to come over and say hi because I'm a Jen Dykstra fan. You just have that. You are a light, I think, for a lot of people, and you naturally are. You grab people gravitate towards you because normally pretty smiley. There's usually good conversation, positivity, and those types of things. And so, you may not always see it, but I think others do. One other thing I wanted to ask you, and I've wanted to do this for years. Why
Uh-oh.
I don't know. Never crosses my brain by the time I get to Wednesday. Talk to me about Wood Grain Wednesdays, Jen.
Yeah, so talking about craft beer. So well, it must have been 8.5 years ago now, Wood Grain opened, and it was right across from work. And so they used to always come out with a new beer every single Wednesday. And it started out as date night for my husband and I because we would just go down, we'd try the new beer, we'd hang out, we'd have a quick conversation. All of a sudden, then maybe about a year into it, a friend of mine that used to do youth group with me, she then started coming down. Another buddy, also around that same time, came and joined us, probably like on a summer where we could sit on a patio. And then we started to so every Wednesday we would go try the new beer. We would just be there. And then we started to get to know other people that were also there on Wednesday. And so now it just like morphed into what we call as Wood Grain Wednesday. So we got to know the best thing about beer, is crazy as it sounds, is that or even breweries, like you can walk in and there's this like common thing that brings people in, right? And it's beer. It's craft beer. You might like a lager, you might like something dark, you might like an IPA, you might like a sour. It doesn't really matter, but the common theme is this. And I've met so many people that I would have I, I would never have probably even had a conversation with them, because what we probably believe are on opposite sides of the fence, right? But it opened up these conversations about just the things that we could have, and I could say, I don't know, I have to learn more, or I disagree with you, and now we can go back and forth and like have a real conversation. And it has just morphed into now Weird Wednesday. I've met a ton of people. Sometimes there's three of us, sometimes it's still just date night and our dog, and other times there could be 20 people. And it's just an open door for people that want to have a place to be that's safe. You can have a conversation, you can listen, or you can just sit there and have a beer.
Right. There's a book I'm going to have you read. My nephew was kind enough to send me a book, and it's kind of I think it was God Made Guinness, something along that title, and it talks about the beginnings of Guinness, but it also talks about exactly what you just mentioned. And a pastor writes this book, but it talks about how beer does bring people together, and man, it's brought me together with a lot of different people. Fortunately, I don't consume it at the same pace that I used to,
Yeah.
for so many reasons
Hmm.
that I won't get into. But it is one of those things that brings people together. And part of it, I'm like, God, I want to go down there and do the Wood Grain Wednesday, and then I'm like, I'm going to be down there for so long. I don't know if I want to do this. It's got to drive back to Beersford, but.
Yeah.
Um, it's just that's one of those little traditional things, and like you said, you've connected with. I mean, if you had to pick a number, how many unique people have you connected with by doing that?
I probably can't even count. Like I have friends in my life now as a result of it that I never would have been friends with had we not crossed paths there.
And it's about getting out, isn't it? I think in
Yeah.
today's world, this little thing that we have has allowed us to sit back behind it
Hmm.
and entertain ourselves and stay within our little box, to the
Hmm.
point that it can be uncomfortable to actually go out and, like you said, have a beer, have a coffee, and they're like, "Oh man, I have to go out and have this thing." And how did that happen? But that's the reality of what where today is. It's easier to send texts
Hmm.
and look at videos and do all those doom scrolling, as I like to call it, versus getting out and having an honest conversation with somebody. And I know I want to have a lot more with you, um, just because of what you bring to the table during those conversations. And if you had to give, let's just say, if somebody was in a situation similar to yours, because there will
Hmm.
be people out there. You and I
Hmm.
both know what's going on in the market and so many things. Someone's going to have to reinvent themselves or redefine themselves potentially. What's the biggest piece of advice Jen Dykstra would give someone that's kind of a little bit lost maybe in their career, or something else has changed? What would be one thing that you would go, this is what I would definitely recommend you do?
Yeah. I would seek out to the people that you know and trust and ask them to pour into you. Like, one of the things that I've had the opportunity over the last year as well is to be with a group of women. So, whether you're men or women, find a group of people that you can just be authentically who you are with, and then ask them the hard questions like, what do you see are my good traits? What do you see are my downfalls? What do you see are places that I can grow? And like sit and receive it, and then write down those things, and and then start to just ask yourself, do I believe this about myself? Do I believe these things are true? And I used to think I am statements are corny.
Mhm.
But I honestly think that if you can take the time and write like your end, how you want to be remembered, and like go back to that. Like for me, I'm a child of God. I am a loving and confident spouse, or I'm a loving and considerate spouse. See, I'm still working on them. But if, and then say them out loud so that your mind, your body also believe them. And you can then start to grow into the person that you desire to be. And you don't, and then you can start to let go. The other thing that I would say is find time to be quiet. If you have to set a timer, start with a minute and just like close your eyes and be quiet. And you're going to have all of these thoughts racing through your head, and try to silence those thoughts. And that's where, if you can take the quiet and then you can take who you want to become in those I am statements and mirror them together, like possibilities are endless.
I think they call that manifestation, don't they, Jen?
I think they do. I've always struggled with manifestation, so I'm starting to understand that. But I do think that
Good.
it's really thinking of the end in mind. Who do I want to become
Yep.
instead of who am I? But who do I
Right.
want to become?
Yeah, and what you said so eloquently is something that I'm learning as well. Of um, uh, my wife has been very influential on trying to get me more into that type of mindset. And so, as always, Jen, it's great advice. I think there's a lot of people out there that need to hear things like this because of the it's loud. Our brains are loud, and you've said a couple times about what's the truth. And we're really good at beating the crap out of ourselves and lying to ourselves, and just sitting back and listening to the truth, and understanding when it's a lie and when it's a truth. I think there's so much to be learned from that. So Jen, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to add, as we talked about earlier in this podcast, Jen is really good, and maybe it's not on a daily basis, but she does drop a lot of nuggets inside of her social media. We are both involved in the same. She mentioned earlier about an entrepreneurial opportunity, but the company is called Life Vantage, and she's also promotes that. But more importantly, the things that we had talked about on here is she will go on and share the gospel, and I think both of us are always one, like, we can't share that enough. We both believe that God's love is the key to everything in this world. So if you want to check out Jen's social media pages, I will add those onto the YouTube channel. And as always, like and share if you like this content and you'd like to keep getting more information and learning more from people like Jen Dykstra. So Jen, I want to say thank you again for joining. We're going to do this again very soon. Jen approached me not that long ago and said, I think that I should do a podcast with you, but I should be the interviewer. And so she talked about being a control freak. I'll just say right now, it's my podcast. I'm in control here, but maybe I'll give up the wheel to let her do that here on the next one. But otherwise, Jen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, and hopefully somebody can grab a few nuggets from inspiration to keep them and move them forward to what they want to do in life.
Well, we both know, when you go sit down with Jen or Jeff, 40 minutes can go by real fast,
Mhm.
and it always does. But this was another one of those cases. So, Jen, I will be back in touch with you. We'll get this. We'll do another one here real soon.
Sounds great.